There's no doubt Nigel Cornick is one of the best-known property developers in Thailand. He ventured here from Australia decades ago and after a stint with Colliers, moved on to head Raymond Land, one of the most successful companies in Thailand. Nigel was named Real Estate Personality of the Year at the inaugural Thailand Property Awards in 2006. And while at the helm of Raymond Land, he saw that company named Best Developer at the awards, an unprecedented 2 times. When it comes to the Patio property market, Nigel Cornick has been regarded as somewhat of a visionary. And today, as the CEO of his own company, Kingdom Property, he has stepped back into the local scene with his project Southpoint. I caught up with Nigel Cornick recently to take a look at his life and work over the past decade. So Nigel, going back way back then, what first brought you to Thailand?
I was offered a job to open Colliers Jardines Thailand office, and they wanted someone with a valuation qualification, and I was the one that was lucky enough to get the job.
Did you ever expect that you'd stay as long as you have?
I honestly never thought I'd ever come here. I first came to Thailand in '87 when I was in the Middle East on an IBM conference here and stayed at the Shangri-La for a few days. But I never ever thought that I would be destined to come back here and work and still be here 23 years later, so no, never.
I've interviewed you many times over the last almost 20 years, but about 10 years ago, one of the things that you did mention, and you were very pointed in mentioning, was that there wasn't enough high-end condominium property development going on in Thailand. So how do you think it's changed? How does it look to you now?
Well, there's certainly been a lot more condominium development. I remember that interview because it was, I think, the Lakes, when we opened the Lakes. And it's fair to say the Lakes, after the crash of '97, was the first high-end project to be offered into the marketplace. And the fact we sold it out in 5 days was an indicator of the pent-up demand that there was for what people regarded as quite an expensive product at the time. I can remember Simon Landing telling me there's no way you'll sell this for 50,000 baht a square metre. So it was definitely a hole in the market that we were able to fill. And since then there's been a huge amount of development. Now it's not necessarily all high-end, but if you look at the number of condominium projects in Bangkok with the South Series, Asia Properties, it's really out, I think, beyond what I would have anticipated. What's behind us is the past, and we obviously have to move forward, and developers have to be continually looking at the future and adapting their business plans to make sure that they're in tune with the market.
Now, I know many years ago you were looking at Patio, and a lot of people were saying that they weren't interested in Patio, only in Bangkok. What first drew you to this market?
I think probably by accident. We were offered North Shore as a project. And that's really what focused our attention on Patio. It wasn't that we came down to Patio thinking that we were going to set the town on fire because we knew what we were doing. We were offered a specific opportunity. We looked at it, and the more I looked at it, the more I started getting a feeling that we could replicate what we did at the Lakes with launching the first Grade A condominium in the Patio market. And the first for many, many years. I think you probably have to go back 10 years earlier to find anything that would be regarded as Grade A in Patio. So it was not by accident, but it was led by an opportunity.
I think it set a whole new trend too. I remember walking around the penthouse there with you and also my own there at North Shore and thinking how amazing it was to see something like that in Patio. And what a great spot, that no one had taken advantage of it before.
Yeah, it is ironic because the original project there was about 350 units, all very small, all very geared towards a particular end of the market, the cheap end, and we recognised that wasn't what we wanted to build. So we reduced it to, I think, 192 units. Completely changed the perception of the building. And if you remember the pool deck is great on North Shore, and I still think as I look at it today, it's lasted extremely well, as in fact has the Lakes, and both of those projects were existing structures that were converted.
When it was finished, what was the sort of reaction you got from people?
Well, I think it wasn't so much when it was finished, it was the process of from launching it and getting a reasonable pre-sale, but it was halfway through that all of a sudden the patio market exploded, and people, I think some of them doubled their money within the matter of a couple of months after buying it, and they, some reinvested, some didn't, but the North Shore probably, of all of our projects, produced the best returns for people who got in from the first pre-launch stage.
I was at North Shore when it first opened to visit what was then the most exciting penthouse in the seaside city. That same year, Nigel and his team were sponsoring Patia's Top of the Gulf Regatta.
North Shore is the first grade A condominium in the centre of Pattaya, and we've seen a number of hotel operators moving in here. The Sheraton are going to be opening a 5-star resort very shortly, and that's an indicator that people are prepared to come to Patio that perhaps a few years ago may not have considered it as a family holiday destination.
Great. Well, we're going to see you out there on one of those boats.
Yes, the big one.
What about this one here? I think you can do that.
No, I don't think so.
I think it's going to be a bit of spinnaker action. Some spinnaker action here with Nigel.
Which one's the spinnaker?
That one, I think.
I'll leave it to the experts.
Yes.
In 2006, we caught up with Nigel at the Varuna Cup, another event that showcased his keen interest in Pattaya.
There is a lot of interest in Patio, and it's growing all the time. So there will be definitely some upturn in investment into real estate. But I think our particular product in this particular location is unique, and people will not have such opportunities, say again, not in the near future.
The Top of the Gulf sponsorship also continued through 2006 and 2007. By now, Nigel's attention had turned to Wongamat Beach and North Point.
Well, right behind me is the site of one of the newest condos that will go up here in Pattaya, and it reflects real estate industry's confidence in this part of Thailand. So Nigel, I guess this regatta is a chance for you to make a very specific point.
There certainly is. I'm glad to see you're getting the point.
It's right there behind us,
Yep.
right on the beach. Now,
Yep.
as you said, that's pretty special.
Yeah, it's very hard to find sites like that. Beachfront real estate around the world is in great demand, and
Yes.
this is probably the first site to be sold in Pattaya for maybe 20 years. The owners have had it for about 30, 35 years, and as I say, very difficult to find.
Are you excited about the future for Pattaya?
Oh yeah, extremely. New airport, increase in tourism, can only be going one way.
Before long, the project was towering over the Pattaya skyline.
And then after that North Point, I remember standing with you on the deck of Serenity, looking at that site at Wongamat, which was probably one of the last beachfront sites available. I mean, not just in that area, but in Pattaya as a whole. I mean, when you get a project like that, it must have been exciting.
Yeah, again, when I was at North Shore, I always used to stay at the Hard Rock Hotel. And I can remember walking past the swimming pools every weekend and thinking, people come here, they may not necessarily be interested in sitting on the beach, but they want to sit in a great environment, a great swimming pool. They want to have the kids somewhere safe to swim. And so that sort of was the seed for trying to find a site big enough to be able to replicate the area of land which the Hard Rock had assigned, and that was what really we were able to find at North Point. It was driven as much by wanting to be able to produce that environment as to build 2 very big towers behind it.
Now, you might remember being interviewed up there at the topping off at North Point, and you mentioned that that was the highest building that you'd been involved in.
Yeah.
I think whether it was in Thailand or in Pattaya, and that it was a real buzz sort of standing on the rooftop of what was at that point the highest achievement.
Yeah, well, in Patio terms, it still is the highest finished residential tower. The Siam tower behind us is probably the largest or tallest tower. But no, it was the biggest project that we'd been involved in, and the tallest. But after that, the river came along. So no, but the top of North Point is quite spectacular.
I mean, was for you, out of all the projects up to that point, was it the most exciting? And did you feel, where's it going to go from here?
Yeah, I think it was, because it was the first one of any significant size that we were able to take from the beginning right the way through. The lakes, as I mentioned, and North Shore were existing projects. The Legend was not a large project, but it had already been piled, so it wasn't something that we had been able to achieve. And getting that 12 rai with 80 metres of beach frontage in that location, you just walked on the site and you knew you had to have it.
It's our fifth topping out ceremony, our third with Buoy, and hopefully many more still to come.
Yeah. This must be one of the tallest, though, you've ever tackled.
Yeah, this is the tallest by far. I think if we look back, probably the lakes before, which was about 36 stories, but here we're 54, level 54, and if you include the substructure, I suppose we're probably looking at 56, 57 stories. So yeah, certainly the tallest building in Pattaya. It's a reflection of where Pattaya's come in the last 5 years. There's been a huge increase in interest, and as I say, despite the current problems, I'm sure that will continue once we get through the next few months.
Meanwhile, in Bangkok, other projects were in process. But long before that, Nigel had his sights set on the bigger picture.
The river was a massive undertaking. And also a lot of people said, what are you doing building on that side of the river?
Yeah, I know. Many people told me that I was stupid. But I always remember, and I've mentioned this before, that it took me 3 or 4 months to actually know where it was. It just sat on my desk, and someone from CBRE said, well, Nigel, go and look at it at least. It's next to the peninsula, so it must be a good site. And I hadn't actually worked that out. I'd just been too preoccupied on other things. And it wasn't cheap, but we weren't necessarily at that point in a position to pay that much for a piece of land. But the more I looked at it, and the more we thought, well, if it was good enough for the Ritz-Carlton, which was in fact what was destined to be built on the site, it must be good enough for a condominium project. And we worked very hard to secure it, and we're lucky to be able to bring some joint venture partners in at the beginning, who subsequently exited. But no, it's a great site, and as history will now show, everyone is on the other side of the river. And very shortly, I think the Ritz-Carlton may well end up going back on that side of the river on quite a significant project.
In all the interviews I've done with you, you've always had a very positive outlook. In some sense, maybe a visionary outlook, particularly when looking at places like Patio. Is that just your mindset? Is that where you're at in your head, or do you know something that we don't know?
I certainly don't know any more than an average Joe, but I think that it's real estate's a long-term business, and if you are in the right location, as you mentioned, it doesn't really matter, it will come around. And in the case of Thailand, we've sat here many times and we've thought, well, doom and gloom, and things are going to be worse, and how are we going to get over this problem that we have within the political system, or tsunami, or SARS, or whatever. But in the end, it's all come good, and you really do have to accept that when you go into a project, you shouldn't be thinking halfway through you're going to pull the pin and things, things are always going to be the worst. So I'm a great believer, if you've got the location, then they will come. They will come, and that's been proven.
And do your homework, I guess.
No, I think homework is. People always said, "Oh, you pay too much for that piece of land, Nigel. You're stupid to pay so much for this piece of land. The valuation of it is this and this." But it's such a small percentage of the total development cost in Thailand, anyway. Perhaps not in Hong Kong or Singapore. That spending 10% to get something that you may never ever get again is worth every cent, every cent. And I would never change from that. If I want it, I would pay as much as anybody, if not more.
Now, obviously, there's a huge amount going on here. For you, it's a very important market, being here in Pattaya. Southpoint, is it selling, going along the way that you'd hoped it would?
Yeah, we bought the land last July. We got our approvals in 4 months. We're now into construction. Our sales, as we speak, are probably about 47%. I would think by the end of March we'll be over 65-70% if a few transactions we're working on happen. So now I'm looking for the next one already.
Already. Yeah. In the midst of all that, there are property issues, land issues that are going on here in Pattaya. There's talk of a lot of things. So what's on the top of that list?
Well, I think the mayor has realised that development was getting a little bit out of hand here because they hadn't changed the density under which you could build here for a number of years. So what he's done is he's produced a new plan, which is currently waiting, I think, for the Ministry of Interior to sign off on, which will change the plot ratios. And it will, in areas like this, half the amount of space that you could currently build. It will also reduce in some of the areas closer to the city centre, down to 7-1 from 10-1. So it's going to put some controls on the ability for developers to get little bits of land and build big projects on, which isn't good for areas like this. So fully supportive of that.
Yeah, you see many examples here. I'm not going to mention names, but you do see examples where it's built right over on top of the beach, right to the edge of the road. And as you said, in a resort destination, the beauty disappears very quickly, doesn't it?
And that's what would happen up here if this plan was not introduced. It would not be as pristine as it should be. And if you sit here and you look around, you can, I think, understand that.
Now, one thing you've done very well besides build nice projects is get yourself known out there in the community, your projects, and be very much part of the community presence. Networking, for instance, movers and shakers. Why do you get behind events like that?
I think obviously the fundamental critique of investing in any activity, be it for corporate social responsibility or for marketing purposes, is it's got to produce some benefits for somebody and obviously ourselves in terms of what we try and get from it. But I think the movers and shakers is an example of how Patio has changed. If you thought about what you could organise back in 2004 by way of a networking event, you might have 10 people there that had some business relationship or some involvement in what you were doing. But as you saw last night, maybe 250, 300 people, and every one of those potentially is going to have some involvement with our business and some positive benefits to us all. And of course, the funds generated go to charity, and that can't be a bad thing.
Now, looking at the community, obviously, I remember a few years ago trying to encourage you to get out on a boat and sail. Do you remember your reaction?
Yeah, I'm a fair weather sailor, I think I said to you.
Now, obviously, you're not a sailor.
No, I definitely
But
not.
why do you support this sport so much? Why have you in the past?
I mean, it stems from our projects in Phuket. Frankly, that's how it all started. The involvement with sailing. When we did Kata Gardens there, we just happened to be. I forget who it was that we were talking to at the Phuket committee. But they just said, look, we've lost our sponsor and, can you come in and be a co-sponsor? And that was the start of it. And once we had done it once, and then we had the heights coming on, and then the future from Amalfi, then it just transformed into something which became, part of Raymond Land. And some 5 years, 6 years we were involved in it. We produced, many positive things from it, not just helping the sailing community, but for our customers. We used it as a customer event. PR, it was just unbelievable, and I think it's recognised now. If you look at the sponsors that are now getting involved in the King's Cup, now you've got Sansiri and other people that a few years ago they never even dreamt of being involved in sailing events.
A lot of the sailors still ask, where's Nigel? When are you coming back?
Yeah, I think Samui was the one place we never actually did any developments. But again, top of the Gulf was easy because again we had North Shore, we had North Point, we bought South Shore, we had what is now the Zaya, but was going to be the Edge. And frankly, if we'd kept on going, we would, Patio would be perhaps a slightly different place to what it is now, because the momentum of Patio never stopped for me. I can't understand why people were ever worried about Patio in the market here.
Well, you've renewed your interest in the sailing, obviously supporting the junior sailing program here at Varuna, where we're sitting today. That's a good place to start if you're coming back into the sport, isn't it?
Yeah, as you know, I've been coming to Royal Varuna for many years. In fact, the first time I came to Patio, I came here. And so I've always had a very close association with Royal Varuna, albeit not from a sailing perspective, but all my friends that I knew in those early days had some involvement with Royal Varuna. So it's a logical place to start, and my project is 200 metres behind, so even more so.
I guess Varuna is very much a good symbol of Pratumnak and how wonderful this part of Patio is. It's sort of like a little gem, isn't it?
Every time I bring somebody down here, even if they've been in Thailand for many years, they just don't understand why they hadn't been here before or even knew about it. So it's been a very closely guarded secret by the members, I think.
I mean, it's important too when you're doing a development like Southpoint, and you've got places like Varuna that's in the same neighbourhood. People look at the area in a certain way, in a different way, don't they? They see it as more of a family, more of an upscale part of the city, as opposed to other areas that obviously are much busier and more tourist trap.
Yeah, I think the one problem is that to some extent it's been overlooked over the last few years, and some of the areas of Pratumnak really do need some upgrade and improvement. Some of the buildings are quite old, and over time it will all sort itself out. But there are elements of the access which could be better, and so it needs some effort on behalf of the parties in the area to I think push it up so that people do associate with all the things you've just mentioned.
Living and working here, is it still a challenge? Does it still excite you?
Oh yeah, I mean, it's nowhere else to go. Nowhere else will have me. So, no, you couldn't replicate this. Best kept secret in the world, next to Royal Varuna Yacht Club.
A lot's happened in the last 20 years or so that I've known you. Lots of interviews, a lot of things have gone on. You've got this amazing energy. I remember every time I've interviewed you, this positive look on things, this energy to keep doing projects, events, networking, so much stuff. I mean, is that energy going to stay with you think for the next 10, 20 years? I mean, where do you think that you would like it to take you?
The energy's gradually decreasing, but the way of overcoming that is to have people around you who you can delegate and can empower to continue what you want to be continued. And I've always been very lucky with my key staff and people that have joined, that they've been able to get the message and embrace it and just get on and do things positively and not say no. And that is that I think is what it's all about. I haven't got any more energy than most people, but I think that if you surround yourself with people that do have, then you multiply the response by 10 times. So that is the key. It's not my energy, it's other people's energy, but having the direction that I'd like to see them going.